Hello, hello. This is Kim Ades from Frame of Mind Coaching, and you have just joined us on the Frame of Mind Coaching podcast. I am thrilled and delighted to introduce you to our guest today. Her name is Kristen Manieri. Kristen and I go way back. We used to work together, how many years ago? 16, 17 years ago in Toronto for a coaching company. We worked there together. And now Kristen lives in Orlando, and she has very interesting work history that I can't wait to share with you. Kristen, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm so happy you're here. So much has gone on over the past 15, 16, 17 years. And the first thing I want to do is just catch everybody up. You used to live in Toronto, and then you made this big decision to move to the States.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about that first. How did you make that decision? What made you move from such an amazing city?
Yeah. So if anybody has seen The Big Short, that kind of tells the story. So Mark's brother, my husband, has been in the mortgage industry for decades. And back in 2005, that's when, basically if you were in the mortgage industry, you were printing money. There was just so much money. And, we know now why, and, have had a really regrettable turn of events as a result. But at the time, for Mark, it was just really enticing. His brother said, move to Orlando, come get in the mortgage industry, specifically to coach a sales team. We moved, and within a year, the market bottom fell out, and we were $150,000 upside down on our house.
Wow.
It just happened that fast. But, this is the way life goes. There's a plan, and we don't always get access to it in real time. And it's exactly what was supposed to happen. And it ended up sending us in trajectories towards exactly what we were supposed to be doing. So why we moved down here definitely is not what we ended up doing with our lives.
So when you were in Toronto, you and I were working together. You were working for a coaching company. What were you doing there? What was your function?
Started out really just overseeing the events, but eventually I started working really closely with the coaching team, helping with some curriculum, helping with coaching training, really just coming up with a more, I don't want to say intellectual property because that all came from our head person, but coming up with more product in order to keep people engaged. So it was really in the trenches in terms of the personal development world. And that was transformative for me. That was a fork in the road for me. And up until the point when I started working there, it never occurred to me that life could be designed. I lived entirely by default. And then, through that group, I started reading books and going to seminars and realizing people actually think about how they're living. They actually get intentional about the things they do every single day so that they start heading towards where they want to end up. I had never navigated my life before. Right. Life just sort of happened to me. So it was pretty transformative for me.
And then you moved to Orlando, and then you kind of left all that behind.
Yeah.
You decided to create something completely new, something unrelated to coaching too.
Completely unrelated. Yeah. We moved here as a Canadian citizen. I had to go through the immigration process just like everybody else. I couldn't work for the whole first year that I lived here. And for someone who was used to just being highly productive, highly effective, it was torture. And so I started writing for free for other magazines, and I started blogging for myself. I started a blog, and back in 2007, which is when I officially launched it, people didn't blog to make money. People were just starting to blog, really. I don't know when the actual genesis of it, but the idea that you just had something to share and you didn't have to wait for someone to publish it for you. You could just publish it. So I was really at the beginning of that. And I started a website about where to go on date night in Orlando, because as a new married couple with no kids, that was something that was of interest to us. And 12 years later, it's got over 2 million annual page views and over 100,000 social media followers. And it became my career.
So it was called Orlando Date Night Guide. Is that right? Okay. So this is like a thing in Orlando. If you want to know where to go, pick up the Orlando Date Night Guide.
Yes. Yeah. You just if you Google things to do in Orlando or date night in Orlando or romantic Orlando, it was kind of a niche that no one had touched, because of course, when you think of Orlando, you don't think about things for adults. You don't think about Orlando's romantic side.
Right. You think of Disney World.
Absolutely. Roller
World?
coasters, water slides, all of that kind of stuff. So
Right.
I kind of like found this little piece of a market that there weren't any fish in there yet. And I just stayed with it. I think that's the other thing that is out of the ordinary. I wouldn't say it's extraordinary, because I think anyone could do this, but I kept at it. That sort of repeated cadence of just continuing to publish on the same umbrella of the same topic, where most people would have given up or gotten bored.
What made you keep going? Like, what is that distinction, that persistence, that keep goingness about you? What made you keep going?
That's a good question. I think in this industry, in the blogging industry or the social media industry, the content industry, it's always changing, and there's always something else to learn. And for me, there was always something to learn about Orlando, especially after we got out of the recession and restaurants stopped closing and started opening. There was always something new to write about. There was always something new to explore. But even the industry itself, Google's always changing its algorithm. Facebook and Instagram's always changing the rules. There's always new things. Someone just said to me the other day, if you're not on IGTV, that's it for you on Instagram. And I was like, in my head, I thought, what's IGTV? I immediately went home to Google it. But it engaged me as a lifelong learner, because there was always something to get better at. And so it was just so sticky for me.
Didn't you find like you were running out of things to write about?
Never. No. And I don't know that would be true of any town. I mean, someone might look at that and say, yeah, but Orlando, it reinvents itself every 3 years. There's always Star Wars, and now it's Harry Potter, whatever. And I don't even write about theme parks. So those types of things were never even on our radar. But I imagine if you were writing about Toronto, or even like a smaller part of Toronto, like Markham, for example, there's always something. There really, really is. There's always something if you know where to look. And I think what we got really good at as a team is filtering through what didn't apply to our readers and finding what did. And that to me was a bit of a superpower for our site, because we weren't everything. We were highly curated, and we still are. This is what Orlando adults and Orlando couples and Orlando's ladies' night out, this is what they want to know about.
Right. So you've been running that company for quite a long time, and it grew obviously since the beginning, where you were writing things for free. It became a business that was generating some income for you. And again, did it for a few years, tried a few things. Some of them worked, some of them didn't work. As all entrepreneurs, we try things, and not all of those things work. Sometimes we pour our heart and soul into projects, ideas that we think are going to be our light bulb moment, or the tipping point for us, and sometimes they fall short. So you've had that experience, and then you came to a point where you said, I think I'm ready for something new. And that point wasn't so long ago. So walk us through that.
Yeah, they probably crossed over about 2 years of still running Orlando Date Night Guide full time, and then starting to have a bit of a side gig that started to eclipse, I think that's how it works when it happens organically. It wasn't like woke up one day, I'm going to do something totally different. So I have been, for myself, really engaged in a morning centering practice for quite a few years now, and started to really reflect on wow, this makes a big difference.
So hold on, wait a second. What does that even mean? Morning centering process.
Yeah. So my practice is just, I get up at least an hour, even an hour and a half before I should. So whatever that would normally get me up, my kids, exercise, a meeting, whatever, I set my alarm for 5. I get up at 5. So I spend that first 90 minutes usually of every day, either in meditation, some combination of meditation, journaling, and reading. And the impact of that over the course of just that cadence of, again, repeating it over and over and over, was it created someone in here that was just really steady. I noticed that I lost all of those peaks and valleys. I never got really upset, and I never got really down. It kind of created this nice neutral equanimity.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see that I didn't really yell at my kids anymore.
That's a
I
good thing.
didn't yell at other drivers. And I still, I mean, it wasn't an inoculation against anger. I have anger,
Uh-huh.
but those big reactions, like life is happening and I'm just like, boom, unconscious. And I started to see like, wow, this has really made a big difference for me. And I thought, how would I share that? And that's when I started developing courses, and that led into coaching. And then my podcast, Distinct Life, really just created a platform to have more conversations about what does it mean to live more consciously and intentionally. And so it was just like it was like a ship that just started navigating kind of in a little bit of a different direction.
So just for those of you who are listening, I was on Kristen's podcast, and I'm on a lot of podcasts. I've been on nearly 300 podcasts in the past few years, a lot of podcasts. And I'm saying, I said it then, and I'm going to say it again. Kristen is one of the best interviewers I've ever experienced. She is
Thanks.
amazing. So whatever you're doing, keep doing it. You're in your lane. There is no question about it from my perspective. Keep going.
Yeah.
So really good. So you're now coaching people.
Yeah. So
who are you coaching?
I really work mostly with women, and they tend to primarily be mothers, and because I have a life experience that I can really align with what they're going through. Everyone goes through what I call my Awaken Living course. We read Michael Singer's book, The Untethered Soul. We have book discussions about that. And then we also have weekly journal prompts that just, the idea is like, what would your life be like if you stopped sleepwalking? If you were just more awake and conscious to what you're doing, what you're saying, what you're committing to, where you're spending your time, your energy, your money, where does your energy even go? How do you feel in your body? If you just started tuning in to your inner world, what would life be like, and how would life be changing? So at the end of that 4-week course, sorry, these are new earbuds, that sort of dumps into one-on-one coaching and it's just more of that, like, to me, the great thing about consciousness work, as I see it for me, as the value for me, is it's a mountain with no peak. There's just always more to see. There's always more. Life is great. It never ceases to give me more opportunities to keep being more and more conscious about how I'm living.
So you are running a business, and now you're transitioning over to this other space, what you called your part-time gig?
Yeah.
Your side gig?
My side hustle.
And it's becoming your full-time gig.
Yeah.
What do you do with your old business? Do you sell it? How do you give it up? How do you hand it over to someone else?
Yeah. Well, the perfect scenario came along to really merge with, so Orlando Date Night Guide actually has spread across the country. So there's now a Boston, a Columbus, an Asheville, and a Tampa Bay, and a national site. So in 2017, that's one of the things that I did, is I expanded and really just seeing like, could this work in other cities? And it really has. And one of the cities that I started in was Tampa Bay, because it's only, 2-ish hours from Orlando. And the gentleman that owns that, we've been in talks for quite a few weeks, months now, about what it would be like to merge our company so that we could consolidate our operations, but maybe keep our editorial separate and things like that. So that's where we're headed. And what that does, a merging like that, is it frees me up to just simply have a consultant role over there. And so that I can spend the bulk of my time over here in this new direction that I'm heading. So it's great because it frees me up, but it also keeps the business going in a great direction, even better direction, with someone who's much more focused at the helm than I wanted to be.
And how did you find this person? Like, a lot of people think about, how do I get out of my business? Do I find a partner? Do I merge? Do I sell? What was that process like for you? That's a very interesting question, because sometimes as entrepreneurs, we come to the place where we hit a bit of a ceiling in terms of leadership, in terms of growth, in terms of capacity. And we know maybe the team members around us can help us grow, but we're not necessarily the ones to take them to that new height. So like, how do you make decisions? Like, where do I go from here? How do you find that person?
Well, for me, it was starting with the end in mind. I knew what I wanted on the day that it was official, I knew what I wanted the it to be. And so working backwards from that, the site was listed on a site sale company called Flippa. And that brought a lot of different types of offers, a lot of partnership offers, a lot of asset only offers, a lot of just different entrepreneurs who saw different opportunities with what I had created. And then in the course of that, I had a really great offer that I almost took to the finish line. And in the final, days, really, they wanted me to fund some of the finances of it. And that was part of what the official it would be, was that was a deal breaker for me. And I was actually communicating that with the owner of Tampa Bay Date Night Guide. And that's when he and I just started talking about what it would be like to merge. And I hadn't even seen that as a possibility, but that was absolutely the best direction for everybody involved. And so it kind of just came out because I had the end in mind, and I wasn't going to be obstinate and not see other opportunities, but I was not negotiable about where I wanted to end up.
It's very interesting because very often, and not only professionally, but personally, we're heading down a road. We think it's the right road. We think it's a great road. We think it's the only road, but there are some red flags. And a lot of times we ignore those red flags and we keep carrying on. We keep going down that road, and then we end up at a place where we say, damn, I wish I didn't ignore those red flags, right?
Yeah.
And what's required, I think, in not only to have that feeling of, man, I should pay attention to those red flags and I should kind of follow my gut, but this unbelievable level of trust or faith, even not necessarily religious faith, but just faith that there's something better around the corner, that this isn't quite right, and that even though I can't see what's around the corner, even though I can't see what's waiting for me, I know that there is something there. And to be able to back off something that isn't meeting all the criteria or dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's, I think that requires a great deal of not only confidence, but kind of trust that things are going to unfold the way that they could in an ideal situation.
Well, and I think as entrepreneurs, you never want to back yourself into a corner of, I have to sell, or because you're just going to make a bad decision.
Right.
So for me, it was through this whole process, through the months that I've contemplated this and investigated different avenues, I have run it exactly the same. There was never anything that changed that would have me suddenly go, oh, I've gotten myself into a pickle. I've spent all our operations money, or I've ticked off a bunch of advertisers. I ran it as if nothing was ever going to change. And so I was never, I never kind of screwed myself into having, I was forced to take an offer that didn't work for me. And I don't know that I did that, with foresight. I think I just did it. And in hindsight, I think, oh, wow, I'm glad I did it that way.
So do you think your morning routine, what do you call it? Morning centering?
My centering practice. Yeah.
Your morning centering practice. Do you think that helped you to see clearly what
100%.
was ahead of you?
Yes. One of the things that I have said to myself almost every morning for the last 3 months, almost speaking directly to the universe. Universe, we both agree where I'm going. I know we do, because of all the doors that keep opening, all the yeses and nudges I keep getting. I don't know how we're going to get there. That's your job. I'm just going to keep on doing what I'm supposed to be doing over here, and you take us there. And I felt that with every cell in my being. Like, this was a co-creation with something bigger than myself.
Right.
And my faith in that, and returning to that faith every single day, was huge in those moments of anxiety. What if this doesn't happen? What if I'm still doing this a year from now? What if someone lowballs me? Like, all of those things would come in, and I would just say, look, we know where we're going. I don't have to know the how. I just need to keep doing all the right things today. And that just took off all the pressure.
Right. But also underneath all that is, even if I do get a low ball offer, it's all good.
No. Yeah.
It's all good, but it's all good.
Yeah.
Like this doesn't need to rattle me.
Totally.
Right? Yeah. It's all good.
And like, this is just an experience. Like
Yeah.
I've never sold, or merged a business before. This is brand new territory for me. And I love being in those places because it's like, oh, cool. Like I've been living for 43 years. This is new. Cool. I'm having a brand new experience. How great is that?
Right. So you are a person who likes to experience a lot of things.
Yes.
And you are also a person, I think, I mean, I've known you for a while, and we keep kind of coming in and out of interactions. But my exposure to you is like, you're a bold man. Like you are very transparent, very open, and you go to places that other people aren't so willing to go. So you did this 5 minute, it's not a TED Talk, it's a what Pikachu talk? What's it called?
It's called Pashakasha.
Pashakasha.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so what is that?
Yes.
I watched it. I was so entertained and completely like giggling inside. I loved it, but describe to people what it is and what the topic was.
Sure. So Pashakasha, they're in cities everywhere. And if you Google it, you're going to type in Pechakucha, but it actually is pronounced Pashakasha, and it means chit chat in Japanese. And it's basically a format. It's 6 minutes and 40 seconds. And you get 20 PowerPoint slides that transition every 20 seconds, whether you're ready or not. So it's kind of like TED Talk Olympics,
Right.
You have to be so polished in practice when you do your talk, because whether your words are there, that slide is changing behind you. So as an audience member, it's really a fun event to go to. Talks are all different walks of life, but it's fun to watch someone kind of go through the Olympics of doing it. My talk was for their Valentine's Day it was quite a few years ago now, actually. I think it was 2014.
Okay.
And my talk was about how Mark and I schedule sex, and how that was the decision to do that. We've been married for 15 years now. The decision to do that was sort of how we found our way back from little kids, because at the time they were teeny tiny. And it was funny, but it was also really honest.
Yeah.
And it was freezing cold in that room. So I was kind of shaking, not from being nervous, because I practiced it. I knew it word for word, but it was freezing in that room. So I was so tense, but I loved doing it. And I love sharing the message that marriage is challenging. We should talk about it more, that there's going to be some bumps in the road. And one of them is definitely sex.
Right. So, I mean, where do you get the courage to talk about something that's traditionally so private, so personal, so like, intimate with you and your partner? All of a sudden you're like opening the door and saying, come on in, let me give you the story of my personal, deepest self.
With probably a few exceptions, if I know that something I've experienced or realized can be of benefit to someone else, I'll share almost anything, because I get so much out of other people's growth. The books that I read, the podcasts that I listen to, when someone can be really honest about something that they traversed and I get to benefit from that, now I don't have to go through it, it's priceless. You can't put a number on that.
So let's just very quickly talk about why it's a good idea to schedule sex, because I think people want to know at this point, what do you mean by scheduling sex? And how does that actually work? And does it take away the magic?
Yeah. So I guess my first response when people say that, what about spontaneity, is I would rather have non-spontaneous sex than no sex. And for two busy people, when you get into the schedules and the extracurriculars and the parents in town and the travel and the doctor's appointment, life is full, and it doesn't need to be so full, but even if you're living pretty minimally, it's full. Yeah. And to be able to find pockets of alone time, especially if you've got kids that are, not necessarily going to pay attention to a locked door, you have to put it somewhere with intention. And so to me, scheduled sex, maybe a better way to say it is like intentional sex. This is when we intend, and it doesn't even have to be intercourse. I feel like I'm teaching a health class right now. It's just like I intend to be with you intimately in whatever way that ends up looking like. And so, yeah, I mean, to some that might feel like saltine crackers, but I would say if you're facing a sexless marriage or being scheduled, like, I don't know, what would you choose?
And is it possible to introduce surprise,
Sure.
spontaneity into a scheduled experience?
Totally. Yeah, we've had every iteration of it because we've been doing this for 6 years, maybe more. Every iteration of every other week, it's different person's plan. They get to plan it, or
Right.
we're going. Of course, there's once you get back into the rhythm of it and you stop being that cavern between you, and you actually can start coming back together again, then you can get creative. But at first you're just like, oh, we just have to just start doing it again. No.
So here's a question. Let's say you have scheduled sex. I think it's twice a week.
It's just Friday mornings now. Yeah.
Friday mornings. Okay. So what if on Wednesday afternoon you have the urge? Is that off limits?
No. I mean, I'll tell you, for me, Kim, I mean, you know me, I'm a pretty scheduled person. I typically wouldn't. Like, it just isn't in my nature. It's never been in my nature.
Right.
But would I thwart an advance? No. But if the advance came in the middle of cooking dinner and I'm rushing out the door to get someone to gymnastics, it's probably not going to be very welcome. So I think it just takes some discernment on the person that, has the thought, ooh, we should do it. Like, is this an appropriate time?
Right.
How could we make this happen? And
so extras are okay.
Totally. Yes. Absolutely.
Okay. So one of your greatest passions, because, scheduling, you talk a lot about the aspect of having kids in the scene, right? It's hard to work around kids sometimes.
Yeah.
They stay up late. They want to know what you're up to. They jump in the middle of your bed. I know, been there, done that.
Yeah.
I can write the book.
Yeah.
Even now, which is really hilarious, my kids are older. And sometimes I'm in my bed and there's a knock on the door. And not only do they come in, but they literally jump on the bed and join us.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? You're 24. Isn't it a little? But I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Welcome to our bed. Right.
Yeah.
So, but kids are a big, big, huge, important subject in your world. And one of the things that you spend a lot of time doing is figuring out what is the best way to raise my kids. So you've done, I think, coaching. You read a ton of books.
Yeah.
And I want to know what your findings are so far.
Yeah, and there isn't ever one thing. It's always in real time. There's always something in real time that has me really just mine the mindfulness, like whatever it is that I've learned, and be able to stop and say, what do we need right now? What does the situation need right now? And I'll give you an example. The kids, 2 girls, 9 and 11, they started this sister battling. And of course, kids fight, but it's changed. There's like, it lacks kindness and civility and respect. There's something that shifted in the last couple of months that I'm uncomfortable with. It's not the conflict that I'm uncomfortable with. It's how they are fighting that is just, it's just nasty. And so I started with just talking about, let's just set up some agreements around how you go in and out of each other's rooms, because that was a big one. So we made an agreement. If you want to go in the other person's room, you have to state why you want to enter such space, and then you have to ask permission. And they immediately were like, wow, that would work. And then what that ended up evolving into is we were creating this thing called a peace treaty. And they both know what it is. They know it's when 2 countries are fighting, it's how they decide, okay, we don't want to fight anymore. How can we find a way to not fight anymore? And so we're working one-on-one, coming back together, and it's a document that will be a work in process, but it's like, I pivot like that because of all of the thinking I do about parenting. And I think it's so naive to think that you could just come into this role. Naive is not the right word. I think it's short-sighted to say that you could just come into this role and just always know what you're doing. And I think there's definitely people who are very wise and that maybe were raised in a certain way that they have a lot of consciousness in their playbook. But I think for a lot of us, you're just kind of out to sea with it all.
100%.
And so to learn from either a thought leader or a book or a TED Talk or something like that, and just get these little nuggets and think, I wonder if that would work, or I wonder how I could get this to work for me, and just try it. To me, it's just, I can't imagine living any other way.
You're 100% right. I think like we're thrown into parenting and we have no real training. We have no real education. We have a bit of a background, and that background isn't always a solid background, because what we know about parenting by and large, we learn from our own parents, and their experiences and their view of the world isn't always relevant today.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, and some of them are just plain old not so great parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then the question becomes, we're thrown into probably one of the most important roles in our lives, and we're ill equipped.
Mm-hmm.
So the question becomes, where do we look? What do we do when things start to happen that are way beyond our control?
So, and there's so many, like, how do you teach your kids to manage money? What do you do if your kid, someone's being mean to them at school?
Right.
What happens when they start puberty? Like, they're like, it's like every day I'm thrown another ball.
Curveball, yeah.
Like, and it's not that I'm like, oh, I got to get this right. I actually don't look at it like that. I don't find it stressful. I don't feel like this pressure, like, oh my God, I only get one shot. Again, it's like that spirit of like learning. It's like, wow, I wonder if this would work, or I wonder if that would work, or I wonder if I just said nothing, what would happen?
Right.
It's like I call it with my coaching groups, like, be a scientist, like put on your lab coat, put on your lab glasses, and just go through life like, what would happen if I did something different than I normally do?
Right. So I happen to do a lot of work in the area of parenting with my own clients. So strangely, they come to me for executive coaching,
Mm-hmm.
but probably 9 out of 10 times we end up talking about their kids and how things are going. And it becomes a very, very hot, loaded topic. And so over the past 15 years I've been doing this, I've acquired quite a bit of, you could say, a position on parenting.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll share with you like my one most foundational parenting ideology is that my belief is that parenting isn't actually about kids.
Mm-hmm.
Parenting is about the parent.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's called parenting, right? Otherwise, it would be called childing. So what do I really mean by that? What I mean by that is that the most important role of a parent is to manage his or her own emotions when the kid is doing crazy things, like fighting, throwing water bottles across a car, having temper tantrums, messing up in school, whatever it is that they're doing. Our greatest job, our greatest task is self-management. And that becomes the foundation of whatever comes next.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can't manage ourselves when our kids are doing whatever they're doing, how can we possibly expect them to manage themselves? It's impossible.
Yeah.
So that's my perspective. I have a lot more to say about that, but I know that you and I are very passionate about this topic.
Oh.
And every time we talk, it comes up and I get like all excited
and I'm 100% aligned with that.
Yeah.
The course that I'm teaching right now is called the Awakened Mama. And the whole point of the course is that the most important job of a mother and a father, I work particularly with women, so I'm going to say mothers, is to do their inner work. That is the most important thing they can do, because whether they like it or not, how mommy goes is how everyone goes. And you can resent that and say, why don't I ever get to be in a bad mood? Why don't I ever get to have a temper tantrum? You don't, because you're the barometer of the family.
Well, you do, but do it alone.
Yes.
Right.
Right. That's what happy hour is for.
That's right.
But to me, there's nowhere in my life have I seen the evidence of my personal growth more quickly and more clearly than with my parenting. It's like when I get better, that gets better. There's no, like, it's just a direct link. And so
Agreed.
It super inspires me to work with people on this, because I think, man, you could have a new thought or a new way of being or set in a new direction of your parenting on Monday, and you will immediately see the impact of that on Tuesday. Might take a little longer with teenagers, but like I said, my kids are 9 and 11, and they're so malleable. Our house, our family, we pivot so easily right now at this stage that it just thrills me. Like, I learned it, I applied it, we changed, we got peaceful, we got steadier, we got more spacious. It's like, it's instant. And so I'm kind of addicted to it in that way, especially with teaching it, because the payback is so fast. You don't have to wait very long.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And you have, as you talked about science experiments, you have willing subjects, or even
Totally.
unwilling subjects, but you have subjects
Yes.
that you could work with every single day. So, as we're talking, I don't know if you're listening to Kristen, you're probably compelled, you're probably drawn in. You want to know, how do I talk to Kristen myself? Kristen, how do people find you?
KristenManieri.com, and I'll
How do you
spell
spell
Manieri.
Manieri?
Yeah, Manieri. I have to spell that every single time I say it. And I have a 5-day daily ground course that I started, and it's free. It's an audio course that gets delivered to your inbox every day, and it really just walks you through how to start a daily centering practice, why, what are the elements, how to stick to it, things like that. So that's something I really recommend for someone if they wanted to know what the heck I'm talking about. Why would I get up so early? That will explain why. And it kind of gives them a good introduction into kind of what my ethos is and what my work is and what it would be like to listen to me for a really awful long time.
I recommend you go check it out, KristenManieri.com.
Mm-hmm.
Kristen, you're awesome.
Aww,
And I thank you
for
spending this time with me. I hope we get another chance to do it again.
Me too.
Always fun talking to you.
You too. Thank you.